Okay. So, um, we we didn't get very far yesterday, and I want to figure some of that stuff out. But while I'm waiting for folks to join, I do want to try and figure out some inconsistencies I'm having. So, on my model, these two discs seem like they're matching, but in real life, they're not. And I need to figure out if that's actually the case or if something else is happening entirely. I don't really understand what's going on here. So to do that, oh, actually, models do look different. Here's how we're going to verify this, right? Um, let's go in here, capture position. Yeah, they do look different. This is what I'm seeing. So this I'm gonna have to go through and actually like fix all of this. Oh, no, that's even worse. Anyways, let's create a sketch. It can be on any plane. Let's just do it on this plane. I don't even know. And I want to project this body and this body. And I just want to see if I come over perfectly. I mean, it is saying that that's... Okay, let's make this clearer. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. We're just going to hide everything. Okay. This will give us a very clear indication. So, it is lining up in my model. But I'm wondering if I printed the wrong one. So the issue is, in real life, these aren't lined up at all. And I don't know why. But in this model, it does look like things are generally lining up, and I don't really know why I'm having an issue with this. That looks, yeah, that's lined up. Okay. So I think I literally just messed up and printed the wrong one, because I did have this other one here. Oops. This other one here. But oh yeah, see? It doesn't line up. Okay, so that's probably what I did. I probably just printed the wrong. Oh. Never mind. This lines up perfectly. So what's happening here? So another verification I can do. Let's get rid of... I mean, I'm just going to remove this one. Finish sketch. Let's hide literally everything here. This is annoying that I have to do this. But I can't quite figure this out. And it's causing everything to kind of not sit right. It's not ruining things. It still works, which I love. I love when designs work despite them being bad. Yo, Ruby, what up? I'm just trying to fix some issues I've been having with the model in real life before I get into it. But yeah, I'm just not seeing what's actually happening here. I don't know if you're going to be able to tell, but this model here, let me change. See how there's a gap right there, but not on the other side? And then when you look at it from this angle, it's hard to tell on camera, but in real life, it's really obvious that the jack, actually you can kind of tell by comparing the jack with the axle. The jack's not sitting straight, and neither is this screw. So something's happening where these aren't lining up properly, and I'm not sure. Not sure where that issue comes from, because the models say they're exactly the same. Which is fine. Yeah, it's twisted. It doesn't affect the functionality so much, but it's a concern. I don't know why it's doing that. Like, it's clearly... Oh, yeah, you can really tell. You can really tell under here. Like, look how much lower this one looks than this one. Than this one. And again, it's yeah, like, look how crooked that looks. So what is happening here? And looking at my model, just isolating the two discs, they look perfect. Like, if I do this, they look perfect. If there was any inconsistency, you would see. Let's try this side. If there was any inconsistency, you would see an issue there. So I'm wondering, I might just try reprinting these while we get onto it. At the very least, this means the model isn't messed up, which I like. So I'm going to just reprint these. Jack cam left. Verification. Symmetry. Did I spell symmetry right? Verification. I'll know what that means. Jack cam left verification. And then this should be called jack cam right. Oh, and then the other thing is I did have a different jack cam right. But you could see how this one... Oh, maybe that's... Oh, that's the issue right there. Okay. So I just printed the wrong jack cam right. So let's just get rid of the old one. Okay, and then I'm just going to reprint this. Jack cam right. Fixed. Okay, solved. Solved it. Solved it. Just me being silly. Me being a silly boy. I just literally printed an old version when I should have been printing the new version. Gosh. I like that though. It's It's going to save me time because I was fully prepared to have to redo everything. Was not sure what was going on there. Ignore this. This is a mouse strap that I'm printing because I got a mouse problem. Okay, so we're just gonna print this real quick, like. Oh my gosh! See, I'm so bad. I'm so bad. Give me 1 second. I just deleted it. Well, I can undo it actually just to show you. I had a second version of this jack, and you can see the exact same issue. You can see the exact same issue, how they're slightly off here. So that's what happened. I printed the wrong one. So getting rid of this one and currently printing this one. It is a good thing you're here. I do this. I do this all the time. Okay, so that's good news. That's good news. That's good news. We don't have to redo much, so we can bring in some of our stuff again. These can both GTFO. Should probably axle. Original cam. Kind of organize things a little bit because I've been getting so... Oh yeah, I need to see if I can... Can I rename a component in Fusion 360 after making it? I can't seem to find anywhere to rename a component. Relies on a slow double click or a hotkey rather than a right click menu option. Why? I tried the slow click. I am using the assembly mode. Any other unforeseen issues? Not so much. I had some more thoughts on some alternative catch mechanisms that I wanted to play with today. But now that we just literally just verified that the model isn't messed up, I could feel a little more confident about going ahead with the idea we had yesterday with the bar that pushes on that little lever. But the more I've been looking at it, the more I think that I'm missing something. If you're working with the assembly, the component you're trying to rename is likely an external component, a separate design file. Fusion 360 locks these names in the parent assembly to protect the link. You can tell if a component is external. Yeah, okay. Look at your browser tree and compare your component to the image. Open the source file, right-click the linked component in your browser tree, and select Open. This opens the original part. Oh my gosh, that's so annoying. I didn't even know that. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. I understand this now, though. Rename it there. In that original part tab, click the top-level assembly name at the very top of the browser. Use the slow click or press Enter F2. It's still... I've opened the external component. Sorry, I'm just doing a little bit of housekeeping on this design because I've been letting it get... What? Okay, whatever. I'm not worried about this right now. Okay, so yeah, I don't understand why they did this. I used to be able to do, like, when you start a new design, you could do a part design or an assembly design. Oh, should I be doing hybrid designs? Oh, maybe I should be doing hybrid designs. I never even considered a third option. Well, that's okay. That's okay. Clearly I'm not a professional at this software. Anyways, what it's doing is every time I make a component, it's actually creating a new file for that component. And I'm used to just creating components in the same file, but I guess maybe that bogs it down. I don't know. It's pretty annoying. Yeah, it is too late now. So we'll just carry on. We're doing well, and we are learning, and this is probably like the better way to do things. Maybe, I don't know. But it's fine. It is fine. So, okay, I'm just bringing everything back now because we know that that's no longer an issue. What is all of this? Oh, this is all the frame and everything. Okay, we can bring a lot of this back. Just so it's here. Okay, so what I've been struggling with, and I don't think I did a very good job of explaining this yesterday. Is the whatever mechanism is going to have the appropriate travel. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too. Whatever mechanism I have that's going to have the appropriate amount of travel to push the jack into place, back into place, is going to have to hit that same pushing piece on the way up. So, and this is kind of like a theory that I've sort of come up with, and it's helping me kind of figure out what our options are. So looking at this, and I kind of wanted to use a graph. I might do this in the video to explain sort of how I'm approaching this mechanical engineering issue using like a map, an animation map. But I'm going to try and explain this to you now just so that I could see if it makes any sense. So obviously there's individual moving parts to this mechanism. We have our main pedal, which moves the main cams. We have our independent hammer mechanism, which moves on an independent path, but it's on the same axis as the cam, but it's still able to do more outside of the range of motion that the cam itself has. We have the jack mechanism, and then right now we have this pusher release mechanism. So once all of that is considered, we can kind of look at the different phases of this mechanism. Sorry that everything's kind of loud. I've got a few prints going on and whatnot. And this, oh, the door's open. That's a little better. So we can look at the different phases. And right now there's like two main phases. There's jack closed and there's jack opened phase. When we're in jack closed phase, the range of motion for the cam, everywhere from totally open to right before the jack hits the pin that releases the jack, there's no other motion that should be happening other than just the cam motion. And so this is essentially a defined state. The only thing that should be happening in this range of motion is the cam. Once the jack gets lifted up, everything changes. Once the jack gets lifted up, that allows the hammer to move back independent of the cam. The jack obviously moves out of the way. And right now we have this pusher piece that can interact with the hammer. So now we're in a different state. Now we're in a state where the cam can still do what it can do, but all of a sudden the jack and this pusher and the hammer are in a different state. So in order to return this back to our first state where everything is in its rest position, right now we need something that pushes on this piece. And once you push that enough, the jack does return into the rest state. The issue I'm having is that in order to actually get the jack underneath the hammer butt, this pusher needs to push the hammer butt back beyond the point where the jack actually rests. And then once the jack rests, the pusher is once the jack actually is in its rest position, you'll see the pusher actually has to push the tiniest little bit further to get the jack back in, and then once the jack gets back in, everything settles back into this position. The problem is, obviously, anything that has enough range to push the pusher beyond this current rest state will now be able to interact with the pusher even when everything's retracted in this full rest state. If that makes sense. This makes a lot of sense in my head, but it's really hard to actually explain it. So what needs to happen is I need a way, and it might not even be this. There might be another way to do this. I need a way to hold the hammer, and I know I've explained this before, and I know that we both understand what needs to happen, but me talking about it is just how I kind of can sort of convince myself and like iron out the actual things that we need to solve instead of just throwing ideas at it. So right now with the bar, the problem is that this will interact with the bar in this closed state. And what I need is for this closed state, until the jack hits the jack release lever arm, I want there to be nothing acting on this. I want this to feel as free as a standard kick drum pedal at this point. And so having something here that's constantly, like, even if it's just rubbing a tiny little bit, is a no-go for me. So what do we get to understand from this? If we charted this out in like a diagram, we understand that the pedal has sort of a linear animation sequence. It can, it moves in two directions, either pressing or depressing, and it can hold in any of those positions. It can do any of those positions at any speed, but that's realistically, it's kind of like a linear path. The jack, and so we have to use the travel of the pedal as sort of our baseline, where everything else happens along that path. So the jack, for example, when the pedal is in its rest state, the jack is also in its rest state. When the pedal starts moving, the jack does nothing. The jack remains in rest state until we get to this point where the jack actually starts doing something. It interacts with the thing and lifts up. And it happens to lift up to its highest point right as the pedal reaches its lowest point. Now, it's only once that happens that the hammer is able to fall back. And when it falls back, it's actually pushing the jack slightly out of the way. I don't think that's necessarily important. But when it falls back, this is all now, the action of this falling back is independent of the pedal continuing to move, and it's independent of the jack's motion. This hammer falls back sort of outside of the linear motion of the pedal, which is fine. That's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be a delayed action. The action is supposed to happen after the pedal actuates and after the jack releases. But now we need something that is directly coupled to the pedal's movement that kind of works like the jack in reverse, where now that the pedal is fully depressed and the hammer has fallen back, there needs to be something that comes into play that holds the hammer into position as you start releasing the pedal again. And so again, this is holding and holding and holding, and it's not until the jack re-engages with the hammer that the pusher mechanism can actually start moving along the same linear path as the pedal retracting. What makes this a difficult problem is because the pedal is a linear path, this mechanism that pushes... Hold on. This might have just... This whole explanation might have just solved everything. Okay, I think this solves everything. And it was explaining this that helped me figure this out. So the linear path of the pedal pushes forward, and the jack remains in rest until we get to this point where the jack can be fully where the jack can actually start moving. So the jack is only actually moving at the last little piece. So if the jack is at its highest and the pusher needs to do the opposite, could it be linked straight to the pedal? That's almost exactly what I'm thinking. What I'm basically thinking is the jack doesn't move until the very end of the pedal stroke. So we've already figured out a way to make something happen at a specific point in the pedal stroke. And so all we need to do is basically do that in reverse, where we have something we have a mechanism that moves just like the jack with the pedal. But then once the jack releases, oh, wait. Okay, I think I see why this is complicated. So let's say we take the jack theory into all of this. We can have a mechanism that is... So we can have a mechanism that is holding still, not moving, until this point. Once that engages, then it moves with the pedal. And so at this point, it is technically in rest. When you strike again, okay, so this is all we need to do. Run that back. I sent my message before it clicked with you. Well, we haven't figured out exactly what to do yet, but it's the theory that we're figuring out here. And the theory is we can use basically the same mechanism we used for the jack, but we reverse it. So the jack stays in rest. It's technically moving at this point, but in relationship to the cam, it's at rest right now. Nothing's happening to the jack. Nothing's happening to the jack. It's only at this point that the jack actually does something, which is happening right at the end of this stroke. We kind of need to do the same thing, but it's a little more confusing because we need the holder to stay still, which feels like it's doing nothing, but it's actually the only time it's doing anything compared when you relate it to the motion of the jack. And it's only at this point, once the jack goes under, that it actually does nothing and is now combined with the motion of the cam. So we need to think about this in relationship to the motion of the cam and the pedal, not in relationship to what's actually happening outside. Yeah, for intensive purposes, it's at rest. The pushing mechanism is actually at rest when it's moving with the cam. And then it's only at this point here that we maybe decide to stop it. So it stops slightly before the jack hits. And then just like from a playability perspective, that lets us tap, 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 tap. Yeah, and this stays back. So all we need to do is we need to create a mechanism that rotates with the whole assembly and then stops at a very specific point. And that specific point, it's stopped right before the jack interacts with the jack release. The hard part about this is the jack relies on a spring to hold itself and animate itself outside of the cam's motion. But if we relied on a spring to stop this and allow the jack to move forward, we're imparting backwards force on the cam, which we don't want. That's going to reduce the power of the stroke. And we are also relying on the spring force to hold this forward as the jack as the jack comes back under. Which honestly is okay. It doesn't seem like it needs a lot of force at all to hold this. But the big part is like, how do we actually actuate this mechanism? How do we actually actuate this mechanism? and there's a few ways to do it, and I'm thinking it has to do with somehow coupling, maybe using a linkage from the cam in relationship to the frame, because that's like we can have basically an external, we can have a cam body built into the frame and then have something that rides on that. But again, I don't really want to do a cam because that's going to introduce a ton of friction into the system, and I want to try and avoid that as much as possible. So maybe like a 4-bar linkage would work. But I'm not too sure yet. I'm just going to pull this off the print. Give me 1 second. I gotta check my other printer. Okay. I'm not gonna bother putting this on right now because I'd have to disassemble the whole thing to do this. But this looks good. So what do? We have right now our jack does kind of the opposite of what we need to do, but it kind of does the same thing. It moves, and then at this point it actually lifts up. So maybe if we just literally copy this whole design of the jack, but just have it happen slightly earlier. And maybe we can do it from this point and just have it come and curve out. Or we do have maybe we do use a but a stronger spring then is going to impart more backwards force on the whole system, thus making the strikes weaker. So I'd like to do this without adding an additional spring. I know I might sound like a crazy person, and I'm like changing my ideas a lot, but this is exactly how I tend to develop stuff. Because I'm thinking we could have this pivoting on here, and then when it gets to a certain point on the frame, it hits a pivot that launches it up. Okay, well, let me see if I can actually start to model what I'm trying to explain. That way I can explain it visually instead of just like purely conceptually. Nice. You made the pizza, or how'd you do that so fast? How'd you do that so fast? I need to know how you do pizza that fast. Okay. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to get rid of this. And let's bring our... I think I can actually use this catch mechanism still. But instead of relying on something external pushing on this, I can actually couple this to this somehow. Oh, nice. I love Little Caesars. Oh, me too. I have an outdoor pizza oven, wood fired, built with cinder blocks and paving stones. And it is the best pizza ever, but it takes a long time to make. Instant pizza would be nice. So basically what I want to do is I want to do sort of like a delayed version of the jack mechanism. So this stays rotating with the cam at all times. And it's not until a certain point that we can determine on this side of the frame, because the jack... Well, I think we can determine it on this side of the frame because this is where the hinge is. We can determine on this side of the frame when that part swings up and gets locked into position. And we just have to do it in a way that when it does swing up, it then stays relative to the frame still as the thing rotates back. And then that way, because we're using this part of the frame, instead of having something that just like knocks this once, we actually have a linkage mechanism that moves this into position when we need it there, and then moves it away when we don't need it there. And then when it's moved away, it doesn't act on anything and it's completely inert. I think this will work. The problem with this initial idea of having something push this back is the pushing back action happened after. It was like a secondary motion, and that meant that motion was going to have to also come back into play before the jack motion happens, and we want to avoid that. So yeah, let me start just playing around with this, and I think we'll make it clear. And I think it's going to look really damn cool. So we have this guy here. Let's start this again. Let's do this off of this plane. Let's do 0.5 mils. And then I can sketch on this plane. And my screw sticks out here quite a bit, so I have a lot of room to actually work with here. And I just want to essentially copy this shape. So we're doing a second hinge point. This is purely for structural integrity. So these are going to be interconnected. And then we will have some sort of thing that acts against the frame here that will push this in and out when we want it to. Only when we want it to. And so we want it to basically Move with the frame. Move with the cam. Move with the cam. At this point, okay, yeah, move with the cam. Move with the cam, and then at this point, it starts pulling out, allowing the strike to happen, and then it pushes back in, and then I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's still basically having something that pushes on this, but the difference being is we're moving that strike, or we're moving the thing that's pushing this from being a bar that interacts with this, and I feel like that would have a negative effect on the way the whole thing feels. We're moving that to happen over at the axle, which is exactly what's happening with the jack, because technically the jack is hitting something before the beater hits. But you don't really feel it here in the foot pedal because it's happening on the frame kind of closer to the axle, whereas if it was happening here, you'd feel it tap against there in kind of a weird way. And this is more of a tap and slide as opposed to just a pure tap. This is like, me trying to explain this is driving me crazy, but I think the theory's there. I think the theory is there. So let me try and model this. So we want at the point that this everything works in conjunction, and then at about this point, yeah, at about this point we want, at this point we want this to already be out. At this point we want this to be out already. So at this point we want the thing to be out already. Okay. So at this point we want this. I'm just going to repeat myself like a maniac. At this point we want this to be out already. The reason I think this is so complicated and so hard for me to explain is we have to have multiple different things happening at different times along the stroke of this, but we need to do it in a way that you don't necessarily like feel or hear it. And my instinct is that the original idea we had yesterday, where we had a rod that this pushed against, I can just tell that you would feel that in a significant way negatively. Whereas this, we already have proof because of the jack interacting with the pin here that pushes the jack out of the way. We already have proof of us causing an action to happen at a specific time via some sort of interaction between parts, and it doesn't feel bad. So my assumption is that just basically doing the exact same thing on this side with this release mechanism slightly earlier will still feel okay. You will have like a slight, you will still have a slight feeling of like there being multiple things clicking and interacting at different times. But I think we can do this one much more subtly. I hope. And the way I want to do it, instead of actually having this just hit a pin that rotates it at a certain way, I want to do it with like a 4-bar linkage. Which I think we can do. I think we can do it. I think it'll be really darn cool if I can actually figure this out. just don't fully understand how 4-bar linkages work. Like, I want it to be something that goes like this and then just goes like whoop. And then comes... Wait, we want it to go like this. So, okay. There's a specific... So at this point, we need this to fall back. So let me project this. Okay. Oops. Let me project this. Create new assembly context. Capture position. Project this. So we need this to be in this position at this point of the strike. Okay. This swings forward. This continues to swing forward. Jack lifts up. Thank you. I need that. I need to hear that. I need to hear him not going crazy here. The other slight nuance I thought about last night is I was kind of thinking having something that comes up, and my finger's up here just as an example, but I'm actually referring to this guy that's inside. Even if there's some interaction you could feel, all the YouTube comments can give us... Yeah, exactly. So my thinking was I need something that travels along this point, stops at about this point. This can carry through. This holds it, and then this, because it stopped, it holds it in place and allows you to come back. But another option is, and this is if we use a 4-bar linkage, so we can create some like non-just linear rotational movement, but we can actually create like a movement like this. What we can actually do is we could have it so that the mechanism that's holding this, it will catch it at this point, but then instead of just holding this in place as the jack rotates back, meaning we need the pedal to retract almost like half of its travel in order to get the jack back underneath. We could actually potentially have a motion, design a motion that when this is in this position, this doesn't just hold still, it actually pushes forward a bit. So we can like re-engage the jack at this point with very little pedal motion and then have this fall back. So really we're looking for a thing that kind of has motion like this, where maybe it starts back here, comes forward to the point where it catches the pedal, and then actually continues to move forward a little bit before retracting back a bit. So it's going to be like this sort of motion. Almost like we almost need like a figure 8 sort of path for it. So just once again, instead of just holding this in place, we actually have it push forward slightly before coming back. And then when you strike again, it pushes forward slightly and then falls back before the jack. Yeah. It's going to be really cool if we can figure this out. It's going to be really damn cool if we can figure this out. So I think it'll actually improve upon current piano mechanisms, because that'll allow us to then restrike a lot sooner in terms of where the pedal is. I think. Hold on. So this moves forward to the point the jack releases. When it hits the point the jack releases, this can fall back a bit. Yeah, so this is the determining factor. At the point the jack touches, this could be touching, but then that last little bit that pushes the jack forward will actually pull this back. Okay. So actually I was wrong about this. I need this to be... So let's unproject that. Let's unproject that. Unproject that. At this point, we want this touching our hammer. So now we're not only just trying to hold the hammer still to allow the jack get underneath, we're actually going to be pushing, we're actually going to try and push the hammer forward to engage the jack again sooner. Ideally. So at this point in the stroke, this guy needs to be here. Keep doing this. Create. Okay. Capture position. Project. Oh, wait. Sketch. Here. Project. This. Oh, actually, let's do our sketch on this surface. Project this. Okay, so at this point we need that to be there. Finish. Then at this point, oh, that's moving with this. Okay, so I need to do, I see what I need to do. I'm messing this all up. I'm messing this all up, but I got it now. So at this point, I need to not sketch on the catch mechanism. I need to sketch on the frame. I need to sketch on the frame. So then we can, let's just use this surface, project this shape. Okay, so at this point, we get this, and then once this rotates slightly more than this, and the jack lifts up, this is a dramatic amount. This now needs to be sitting back. This now needs to be sitting backwards. And so we can project this. Okay. This is, I think, all we really need. So at this point in the cam's rotation, the jack needs to be, or the catch needs to be hitting the cam, the hammer, butt. And then once we go up slightly more, that's when it backs off. But then when we come back down again, it pushes the hammer back into a position where the jack can get underneath, and then it just carries on with its rotation. And so then in theory, once we go back to this orientation, and the jack is underneath, this is back here, this is back, and then the whole thing rotates back. We want this. I guess we can just have this sitting up against the hammer butt again, and we're just using this as reference. This actually isn't going to matter much. So once again, we sketch, create new, capture position, sketch here, project this body. Okay. If the linkage pushes on the hammer, could that cause any problems with the initial hammer return, or could that be solved with positioning and or timing? Yeah, so my idea is that the linkage pushing on the hammer only matters once the hammer is retracted, only matters once the jack is out of the way and the hammer can move back. If the jack never moved out of the way, this does nothing. It just dances. It just goes like this. It's not until the hammer is actually back and the jack is out of the way that the motion of this actually does anything. Which is important because let's say you did a strike where you didn't let the jack reach the point where the jack releases, the pedal can still carry forward and hit. And I think that's an important mechanism to remain, an important mechanism to keep, because sometimes you want to just like do a short little burst that still hits there. And this allows you to do the really, really, really fast bursts. You can almost like use the bounce of this to increase your speed. So that's going to be key. So now all we have to do is figure out how we could take this path. So the path of these inner circles follow a arc that is the exact same as the cam's full rotation. And all we need to do is essentially program the rotation around this axle to happen at these specific points. So to do that, let's project this, and we can draw a circle from this point, and I'll do a, so you could see how this path is the rotation of the axle, and you could see each of these circles stays within that path. But obviously what happens to the actual pusher changes based on its location. So at this location, it's pressed up against the cam. So you could see here, the corner of the pusher here is pretty well in line with the arc of the cam. And at this point, it's still pretty well in line, but it's not until this point up here that it actually moves well out of the way of the cam's rotation. And this is where it's going to catch. So basically nothing needs to happen between these two, which is correct because we don't really need it to do anything at this point. And it's only between this point and this point that it needs to actually shift. Um, so now the question is, how do we keep this still and only have it move at this spot? And ideally, we do this with a linkage as opposed to some sort of like contact set where it actually has to hit something in order to do that. Because if it hits something in order to do that, it's going to feel weird. And the relationship between this axle and the main axle never changes throughout the whole thing, but the relationship between this axle and this surface does change. So all we need to do is have it so it rotates up. Once it gets to this point, it rotates backwards. The fact that it rotates backwards is annoying because that is opposite, but that's okay. I know I'm saying a lot that doesn't mean anything. I'm saying a lot that doesn't mean anything, but this is what I need. This is what I need to do. So once it gets to this point, everything needs to start changing. One of the links is going to have to be between the frame and then the axle. Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of the same thing as what's happening here, right? This jack remains stationary to the cam until it hits this piece here. The piece of the frame here. So in a same sense, we need this to stay relative to the cam, stationary until it hits something here. But instead of hitting something, I want to see if I can use a linkage. Because the cool thing about linkages is you can create, like there's a guy, Canadian guy actually. His channel's called Engine Easy now. Engine Easy, but it used to be called something else. But Engine Easy is doing this whole thing about like programming with 4-bar linkages. You can actually program really specific shapes, and so that's kind of what I want to do. I want to create a path for this using a 4-bar linkage, or maybe not a 4-bar linkage, but some sort of linkage mechanism that allows the rotation of this to stay constant until we reach a specific point, and then it starts to move. If the jack and pusher need to move at about the same time for retraction, could they be linked simultaneously? That's the thing, is they can't happen at the exact same time. They need to happen at slightly different times. So for some reason I keep thinking about this as like a gallop. Instead of like a deer, how sometimes they'll gallop with like all 4 legs at once, we need to do more like this motion, where it's like jack, catch, and they're slightly off. And so that's why I feel like adding yet another contact point, you'll feel all of those independent little hits, and I don't really like the idea of feeling those. Might be okay. You might not notice it, and it might actually feel kind of nice, like really heavily mechanical. But I want to see if we can try And if this works, we might even be able to actuate the jack in the same way, but we will see. Because the way the jack works is actually quite a primitive thing, but that is exactly how a piano works. So it felt right to do it that way. The difference between this and the piano mechanism is the catch in a piano mechanism happens pretty passively, but in an upright piano mechanism, it actually doesn't work that well, and they haven't really figured out how to make it work well, it seems like. So, and this is much closer to an upright piano mechanism than a grand piano mechanism. So, how do we do this? It keeps coming back to this. At this point, we need this to rotate out. And we need it to rotate out in a way that upon its return, it has enough force to push that hammer back. That's the other factor. And it looks like these could gear together. Like we could just literally have these gearing together. But the problem with that is it's actually going in the opposite direction. We need this to rotate outwards. And right now, if we were to just direct gear these, it would rotate inwards. So we can't have that. Now I could do a planetary gear that reverses the direction, which could be really damn cool. And theoretically, instead of having it so that at this state, remember how I was saying like the cam or the pusher at this state is the same as the pusher in this state? Theoretically, we could have it so that in order to keep this motion constant, it doesn't matter what it's doing down here. So if there's a mechanism where it ends up that down here the cam ends up like upside down almost, that's totally fine. The problem is it's got to rotate out from the out position to the in position, and it can't rotate further in at this point. So it either needs to stay or continue rotating or start reversing direction and rotating outwards at this point. Which I don't know if that's going to be easier. It might actually work. Because if this is the point where everything changes, this is the point where everything changes. We could have it so it's kind of going from this position to this position and then whips out dramatically down here. Oh. I can actually feel my brain getting like warm trying to think about this. Like this is brain workout. This is giving me a brain workout. Which I enjoy. Gets me real exhausted, but this is why I don't physically work out anymore, I guess. So in like the simplest terms, we could literally have a path that it follows. It hurts. It hurts. We could simply have a path that it follows, but again, that's just going to introduce so much friction. I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it with... I want to rely on like purely rotational motion to create this animation essentially. So how do we do that? We need it to basically, as this point gets to this point, we need to pull this in. It's totally doable. Like this motion, going like pulling this in and then pushing it back out again is totally doable. I know it is. I just don't know exactly how yet and like what to reference. And it's kind of working in the opposite, because if we're referencing this frame here, as this rotates upwards, oh no, that's right. So as this rotates upwards, it's pushing this away. And then as it rotates downwards, it pulls it in. As this rotates upwards, it pushes it away. That all makes sense. That's exactly what the jack does. But because the jack is relying on a spring, the spring is what's pulling it back in, but the spring won't be strong enough to pull this back in and pull the hammer back out, because it'll have to act against this spring, which I don't want to have. I don't want to have competing springs, because then it's just like this spring always has to be stronger, and then if I want to strengthen this spring, then I got to strengthen this spring, and then all of a sudden we have so many springs and they're all working against this whole mechanism. So that's why I don't want to rely on springs for this. I need this. I mean, it really does seem like just having a point here, but then it'll hit that point on the way back up. So that's why we need to rely on a linkage. But what does the linkage? Okay, let's look at 4-bar linkages for a second. Let's do some studying together, because there's a 4-bar linkage. Oops. Whoa, what did I do? 4-bar linkage. Oh no, did I shut down OBS? No. Okay. Shout out to Mechademi.
We will also talk about 3 possible types of motions that a forward linkage can have depending on the length of the links. Let's start with reviewing some definitions. In a forward linkage like this, link 1 is called the frame or base. Let's assume link 2 is the driver and link 4 is the follower. Then the rotation of link 2 is transmitted to link 4 via link 3, which is known as the coupler. Now let's classify all the possible ways that this linkage can move.
We kind of need a seesawing.
Link 2 rotates a full round of 360 degrees, and link 4 oscillates in a limited range of angle. Let's have some definitions here. Whenever in a linkage one of the links rotates a full round of 360 degrees, it is called a crank. Otherwise, if it cannot rotate a full round and just oscillates, it is called a rocker. In this example, the driver is a crank and the follower is a rocker. Now, with these definitions for the crank and rocker links, we can say a forward linkage might have one of these 3 types of motions. The first one is the crank rocker, where the driver rotates a full round and the follower oscillates in a range of angle, as you see in this example. The second type of motion is the crank or double crank, where both of the driver and follower links rotate a complete round of 360 degrees. And finally, the last type is the rocker or double rocker, where both of the driver and follower links oscillate in a limited range of angle. A 4-bar
4-bar linkage takes input rotary motion to an output elliptical reciprocating motion. 4 bars link together and connect to a rotary driver. These bars can have a numerous amount of configurations. Depending on the connection points of the bars themselves, they can move at similar angles or even at different angles from each other. The difference in reciprocating angles allow each bar to draw their own elliptical shape, which is one way to explain and measure their movement. The place in which these bars are connected to the driver changes the system to either have a very limited distance of movement or can allow it to move very far. The direction of travel is reversible, and the driver can be powered clockwise or counterclockwise. However, this does not influence the motion of the bars. The main mechanism of pump jacks are actually 4-bar linkages. They can also be found in door closers, valve gear.
Okay. Little refresher on 4-bar linkages here. So obviously we have two pivot points here. This is kind of one link. And then we could have an additional link happening somewhere up here. And then this is our second link. No, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. We need the linkage to happen somewhere across here. This is one of the links. How is this a 4-bar linkage? So we've got one. So we can say this is so we can kind of think of it this way. This is one of our links. This is one of our links. And that link is the same as this one. And this is all we really have to figure out. Whatever happens on this end, the only thing this needs to do is not go further than this. It could stay at this point, or it can rotate back in this direction, but it can't go further in this direction anymore once it passes this point. So our range of motion is at the minimum just this, but it could theoretically rotate further out from this point, but only once it returns here it can rotate further out. So we could do a rocker linkage here. This could be a rocker. This can't be a crank. This has to be a rocker. Meaning our other linkage could happen somewhere up here. I guess independently. Or it could happen even back here. So these are all connected via this linkage. Like that. And so let's just, out of theory, bring this up to a certain point and like connect these just so we can get an example here. This stays stationary as this whole thing. See, this works in theory, because if this stayed stationary, if this linkage stayed stationary, as this one rotates downwards, it's going to pull this in. Oh, okay, wait, so then if I were to do a 2-point circle, or no, I guess a 3-point circle, and we connect these 3 points, theoretically our linkage could be anywhere along this path. So let's just use this as an example. So anywhere along this path. Like this, right? So if this was stationary, somehow, just like to here, as this rotates down to this position, it's going to pull this in. The problem is, once it reaches this point, it needs to start rotating back, or it needs to push, or it needs to stay at that spot. And obviously it can't stay because this length has to change. Okay, so taking that into consideration, the only point where these linkages stay the same length is at the actual point of the axle. But obviously we can't do that because that creates a 3-bar linkage. So to go from this to that, we need this rotating along this point. We need this to stay the same, and then only at this one point it changes. So this is our path. The path needs to basically go like this. So if we draw a spline, we can kind of connect all of these like this, but unfortunately we can't ever go. Ah, shoot. Why? The splines aren't working for me lately. Okay. Why can't I ever change these? I gotta ask Gemini. Why am I unable to move spline handles sometimes? When spline handles lock up in Fusion 360, it's almost always due to a hidden geometric constraints on how the line was originally selected. Handle is padlocked. An automatic constraint is blocking it. If you snap the spline point or handle to an axis, origin, or other piece of geometry while drawing, Fusion will likely to fix. Zoom in close to the spline point, look for a gray constraint icon. Okay. That's so annoying. Why would it? There's literally nothing. I don't know what's going on with this. But it's okay. We don't need these splines, I suppose. Even if we had it so this like kind of wobbled back and forth, that would be fine. This is just the range of motion I need. Everything else doesn't matter. So what causes that range of motion that then doesn't either try to pull this in later, further, What if we grabbed this from the back end? Where's the point? So we're rotating. This is the this circle represents the main linkage. This is the linkage that we have to rely on for our motion. This circle represents our second bar linkage, and this is the actual motion of the rotating of the pusher. But we're limited because it can only go this far. It can't go beyond this point. So it can't go beyond this point. Can't go beyond this point. It's just circles and lines everywhere, but this is, I think, helping me. So we somehow need it so that when this travels down, this goes here. And I guess what we can do is basically go like this, pull this line out, connect it here, and then make these equal length. And then I can adjust this point. So at this point, then the problem is this pushes it in. I think we're going to get somewhere with this. I'm relying on it, obviously. So my thinking is that, oh shoot, I messed this up. Okay. So my thinking is the line from the main axle to the point of rotation of the pusher, that's a constant. That can't change. Anywhere along this path, this line has to remain the same length. And we verified that by drawing the circle, this dotted circle around our main axle. And so we know the path that this axle has to take. We also know the key points where the corners that interact with the hammer, we know where they need to be at specific points along the rotation of this. So we can assume these key points are firm. We can't change these 2 points. Now, referencing these 2 points, we can draw our third linkage, which is these 2 lines. But right now, these 2 lines are different length. And assuming the linkage can't change length, which it can't, if we make these equal, if we make this equal this line, we know that our linkage has to, we know that this linkage can end up anywhere where I can pull this point to. Because this, now that I pull this point, these lines are staying equal, which means the linkage isn't changing length. So this is all working. And what I'm saying here is, if I were to have a linkage from, say, this point drawing to this line or drawing to this corner, as the axle rotates, it's going to push our pusher out to this corner at this point. This is great. This is all good news. The problem is, the big problem is, we're hard limited with the whole pushing mechanism not being able to rotate inwards any further than approximately this dotted line. It's going a little bit further there, but that's all fine. So when this rotates further down, assuming these lines are solid linkages, once we rotate down into this position, this line should be a similar length, but the path in between is going to force the rotation of our pusher to go well into this main circle area, and we need to avoid that. We can't have that. And we can play around with this line. So if we had a linkage here, it's still pushing. Once we rotate further than this point, so once we're down here, it's still pushing the pusher into that circle, and we need to avoid pushing the pusher into that circle. If we come out here, tackle it from the other end, once again, well, this is actually now fully in tension if this is rotating further. So this doesn't work yet. It doesn't work considering this is a linkage and this is a linkage. So what do we got to do? We got to move our linkage. We got to move our linkage. Are there other linkages we could use? Is there a 5-bar linkage? Alternative. Is there a 5-bar linkage? I want to avoid any sort of like friction type design. Engine Easy recommends a specific channel. Is it this one? There's certain channels that literally just post mechanisms, and it can be really helpful in this context. But I'm wondering if I'm thinking about the linkage wrong. So maybe instead of directly linking these two, we do something else. Because if we had these two connected in a line, oh no, these two connected in a line. That's why I feel like the path of this has to go in and then stick back out considerably before it rotates back into place. Oh my god. Oh my god. We're so close, I feel like. I know I've said this for the last 2 days. But I truly feel like there is a solution here. A lot of the things I do, I just have like a gut feeling that it can work or not. And I don't know where that comes from. But it usually works. So we need to trace a path where this comes in and then starts bouncing out again at this point. It's the only way. So the point where this is the minimum. This can continue out this way, but it doesn't matter because the pedal never reaches that point. This seems way too limiting. Like, why am I unable to figure out why this can't do what I need it to do? I should be able to basically create any pattern I want out of this. So what's stopping me? This rotates along this axle. That has to happen. What if we abandon... Where else can I combine this to? If I look at this 4-bar linkage again, that rotates and causes that to happen. That's kind of what we want. We want a crank motion turning into a rocker motion. If this is our crank, but it is technically a rocker. No, a linkage was never easy. It's just the ideal solution. It was never easy. I just like it a lot better than some like friction-based cam thing. And there's a concept here that I'm not fully grasping. But I think it's one of those things where I'm just missing one little ingredient. Just missing one little ingredient. Because these are obviously intrinsically linked. There's nothing I can really do about this. And maybe I need to move this whole thing. But these are intrinsically linked. So why am I unable to produce the linkage path that I need? If these are intrinsically linked, and obviously this is intrinsically linked, this is a link. Maybe I need to not reference the frame. Maybe I need to reference the cam, because the cam rotates. On its own. So let's look at our sketches against the cam here. So that's our link 1. That's our link 2. We need this line to fall to this point, and then at this point we need it to shift direction, maybe end outwards. The design of a linkage is not easy, but from a assembly and like manufacturing perspective, it would potentially be the smoothest, most friction-free option. And so in that sense it's easy, but I have to figure out how first, and that part's not easy. That part is not easy. So at this point and this point, or no, this point and this point, it's kind of the same length linkage as that point and that point, because they end up in the same spot, but that's not the right way to think about it, I don't think. And this doesn't actually matter. This location doesn't matter as long as it doesn't pass through. So let's ignore this one for now. Focus on these two. These two only combine at certain spots with a consistent linkage. Sometimes I just need to stare at something for like a really long time. So this needs to fall, and then at this point shoot out. So the linkage here is boom, boom. How do we do that? How do we do that? Is there a circle between these 2 points where this doesn't end up? Is there a circle between these 2 points that doesn't intersect with this? No, there isn't. What does that mean? What does that actually mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And what if we abandon this as a pivot point? Can we do this in a way where that sticks out, comes in, and then bounces out? Is there a way we can do that with a linkage? Because these lines actually end up like almost intersecting at the point of the axis. That's what's so confusing about this. So instead of, okay, I think I'm figuring it out. Instead of relying on this pivot point, maybe we need a different pivot point. So, I'm going to finish sketch. I'm going to get rid of this sketch. And I'm going to do a new sketch. I'm going to so if we have a path that goes boom, what is the axis point there? In relationship to this axle, because this is the one that we have to rely on. We have to rely on this dotted circle as our main path. What can carry this to this point in that amount of rotation? What can carry that to that point in that amount of rotation? And then as soon as this hits this point, it starts rotating back. There has to be a path. I'm ignoring these circles now. We can get rid of these. Let's ignore all of this. All I'm concerned about are these points. Boom, boom, in relationship to this. Starting at this point, this can only rotate a tiny little bit. And it needs to bump this out a significant amount. So so theoretically, let's say we did a linkage here to there. As this rotates up slightly, we're getting a lot of vertical movement that can happen there. as it comes in. Pulls it along this path. Okay, so this is another option. So we can have it so that this to this looks like that. As this rotates up, it gets to a point where it frees itself a little bit and pushes up on this. So what's going to cause that? So let's assume maybe we have what if we did? So we only care about this point, and I guess technically this point. Theoretically, we could have a linkage from here to here, tangential. From here to here, tangential. So as this rotates, but then obviously at this point, it loses its tangentialness. It loses its tangentialness. And as long as we make this equal to that, .363, 21.363. So that to that. Now, what satisfies this arc? This rotates cleanly, and it's only at this point that it starts to pull away from the tangent. Is this also 21.363? No. It's close enough, though. I know why that's not the same. But it could be 21.363. So what causes this motion to happen? Now, this isn't going to work technically because this rotation should be a lot bigger. It's only this tiny little bit of rotation that actually... God damn it, this is hard. This is so hard. Oh no, I see what I was doing here. I see what I was doing here. This distance is necessary. We need to understand the relationship, but it doesn't have to be the linkage directly between these two. That makes that happen. We need this distance, which is actually just a rotation of the circle, but we don't need our linkage to actually start at that point. This just represents the amount of degrees that the cam needs to rotate to push this out. So if this, I mean, this is the obvious. I mean, worst case scenario, I could just do a contact, but just to get it to work, but I have time. And I think it's valuable that we're at least putting the thought into this, in my opinion, because I really want to rule this out as an option before settling for something else, and it just still feels so possible. How do I make this action happen in this amount of rotation while still allowing it to rotate back? That flips up. How many degrees is this? 11.2 degrees. So in 11.2 degrees, we need to make that happen. So what happens if we go up here? And we try to actuate it from up here. And we make this 11.2 degrees. So now I should be able to, yeah, okay, I can rotate this around and find out. So the low stroke happens here. Just out of curiosity, what do we need to make this happen at this point? What linkage can we make? Does this change anything? Does changing the point where this actually articulates change anything? Is there a position where the line between this and the line between this are the same? Here it is. The line between this and the line between this are only the same at this point. Is that correct? Can I do this? Can I literally go like this? And then go like this? And then make these equal. It doesn't want to solve for that. So, assuming that not equal, not equal. At this point, they're equal. Everywhere else around the circle, are they equal here? What? Okay, so here they're equal. Wait, no, I messed that up. Is there anywhere where these two lines are equal? Yeah, that's Is that the only spot? I'm just ruling stuff out by doing these line measurements because it does seem like the only spot where this 11.2 degrees allows for an equal linkage between these 2 points. Because we know these 2 points are set. We need these 2 points because this is the point where it catches and this is the point where it pushes it back under the jack. So these have to be here. We know it has to happen within 11.2 degrees of the rotation of the whole cam. So this is the only thing that makes sense if we're relying on this as our axis point for the rotation of this. But what if we're not relying on our axis point there? So I guess we can test this out by bringing this way out. Verifying 11.2 degrees between these two. Making these lines equal length. And then drawing a line from here to here and a line from here to here. If I make these equal, does it give us the same? No. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so this now is showing us that if we do our lines longer, so now can I literally pull this? Ooh, okay, so I can pull this around now and figure out, okay, this is useful. So theoretically, if I pull this, yeah, this should line up perfectly there. Yeah, okay. So now this is telling us that for this 11.2 degree rotation of the main cam, where regardless of how long this needs to be, where our linkages will end up. So if we do a longer spot of rotation on the cam, that means our hinge, which is originally the big screw here, now has to be out here in order to make these linkages the same length. And with this, we can see, is there a spot where, okay, now with this, we just need to figure out where this line becomes perpendicular with the axle. That's all we have to do. So theoretically, right at this point. So now what this is telling us is when this rotates 11.2 degrees, if we have a small little linkage, as this rotates back 11.2 degrees, it's going to rotate this linkage. No, it's going to pull this dot in. Right? What's happening here, though? What is actually happening here? So I just want to take a look at this some more. So what is actually happening between these? what direction does this rotate? So I think this rotates downwards. So then we take these 2 points and we connect them. We make these equal. That's wrong. That's not what we need, because we already have that linked. I need to figure out these. So in order to push, what is this connected to now? If we're pivoting at this point, if we're pivoting at this point, so that back comes in once we get here, where's our third linkage? Once this rotates here, this point flips inwards. What is causing that to flip inwards? Let's delete these so don't get confused by these. What is causing this to flip inwards? Where's the hinge on this? Or I guess the hinge is right here. So it's a tiny little hinge, which is okay because this could just rotate throughout this whole thing. It could just spin. And as long as it has so this can just spin. But this needs to connect to something else that pushes it to this point. So if it's up here, or if it's here, it's not going to push it to that point. What is causing this to rotate in this direction? I guess that would be some sort of line this way, correct? And this has to be equal too. But that can't work either, because once this pulls it down there, it's going to lock. It's going to be in complete tension. Now, if we did do a gear, that worked with this, the rotation of this would spin this. This is where a gear could potentially work. we're so close. Why isn't this working? I don't know. Like, this is all just what's happening inside my brain. I don't know what design skill this is. I don't know if this is working. I guess I'm just trying to rule out possibilities. And really understand, I just ask myself questions, right? So, like, what is it going to take? What is it going to take to have a mechanism that within this, we know that in 11.2 degrees of cam rotation, we have to get this point to this point specifically. And that's all. That's the only thing I know as a fact. And I want to do this in a way that relies on no, like, friction-based or contact-based cam-like operation, which would be the easy way to do this. But just in my head, I feel like it should be doable. But I don't exactly know why I think that. I don't exactly know why I think that. So we're kind of in this position right now. If we did the gear type mechanism, well, if we do the easy way now, you can get free content later by designing the linkage. I can, and I've often thought about sort of doing that. And this is definitely where I get into, I'm like my own worst enemy, because I feel like if I'm not going to do it the first time, I'm probably not going to revisit it. Obviously, if I did this and it blew up, that would be a different thing, but every video I do, I obviously want there to be enough interaction that it's enough for me to want to pursue it further. But I tend to only like to do things once, and once I'm done with it, I kind of don't want to do it again. So that's my problem. And then at this point, it's kind of like, if I can't figure it out now, am I going to be able to figure it out later? And if I'm relying on a video where I need to figure this out, that's a problem. I like to push it as far as I can go on the first round. So that's sort of my issue right now. So what is happening here? This is assuming the axle's up here as opposed to down here now. Which is nice, because then now the rotation of this is happening with the rotation of the cam. And it could be a direct gear. But it also means this thing's going to rotate a bunch of times, which isn't the worst. What am I looking at as far as like what's happening from a... I can't even put a gear here because I've got my cam here. Oh, but I totally don't have my cam here. But it is right in the way of the jack mechanism. And I'm early enough on this, because once I figure this out, we're basically done. The damping mechanism's going to be an easy thing to introduce after. The damping mechanism's nothing crazy. So I wanna put the time into at least make sure that this isn't gonna work. This is the time to figure this stuff out. Later on in the process, you know, once we come to the deadline, I'm going to have to start making sacrifices. So I'm fully prepared for that. But I just don't have to do that right now. I'm stubborn. I'm a stubborn boy sometimes. The big issue is this motion is so huge for how much degree of freedom this is. And then following this degree of freedom, we have like a considerable amount of motion to carry through. Oh, but what if we didn't start at the actual axle? What if we put the axis of this out here? Okay, let's explore that idea. Let's explore that idea. I know this probably isn't fun. It's like the worst content. But I think the result could be, it's moving less than an inch. It should be easy, right? Well, that's the thing. We need it to move. It's only less than an inch from here to here. But it only takes 11 degrees of rotation of this to make that motion happen. And then after that point, we have like 60 degrees of motion that we have to carry through with. And so the problem is turning that 11 degrees of motion into that relatively drastic amount of pushing force is fine, but then figuring out how to carry that through the remaining 60 degrees of motion on this with relatively small pushing motion. And again, it can do whatever it wants once it completes this motion. The only thing it can't do is rotate further into the circle. I need it to rotate Wait. It's allowed to rotate into this further into the circle. So long as, or it's allowed to keep rotating Okay, hold on. I'm gonna follow that line of thinking in a minute here, but I want to just explore this other idea I was just having here. Let's grab this. Let's grab this. Project. Let's grab. Okay, cancel. Why isn't this working? Project. Why aren't you letting me grab this? This is so frustrating. Oh, did I turn? No, it's on. There. 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 Is this already on that sketch plane? Oh, did I already project that? Maybe that's what's happening. Yeah, that's what's happening. So what if instead of actually coupling to this, we ignore the main axle rotation point, because this is the path, but it doesn't have to be what this actually rotates on. We don't have to have a linkage between these two. So once again, ideally I can do this with these being my main linkages. That would be the best. That's right. If once I stop talking, sometimes though, like I have a lot of success figuring things out while I'm driving. That's like my favorite time to figure things out for some reason. And I never talk while I'm driving. So, but talking it out definitely does help. Now, is there a scenario? This is why I don't think this axle can work, because there is no scenario where this can convert to this in that 11.2 degrees of this rotating. Where this bar, this linkage doesn't have to pass through the circle. The law is you figure stuff out when you can't write it down and forget by the time you can. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's such a shame because this motion here is so easy to achieve. It's what happens after that motion that I can't figure out. And so I'm trying to visualize how to get this motion from this point to this point with 11.2 degrees of rotation of the cam, the main cam. Where this dramatic movement then doesn't force this to carry through deeper into the cam. Because it needs to stop here. It needs to stop here. It can't keep pushing this way. So what's happening? But that's why I feel like if this is pushing, maybe if we have the cam arm pushing up, so instead of relying on the axle here, because that just doesn't work, can we rely on an axle anywhere else on this surface? Because there is this option where we go from here. We make these equal. So that's right on the surface of this. So in 11.2 degrees, this just swings down. That's totally doable. And then what happens? This might be our solution here. Let's just see. So I'm just using this. Is there literally any circular path between these two? Why is this so hard to figure out? I think the only circular path between these two that doesn't intersect the circle is a small circle in between them. Which isn't great. Which isn't great. The only circular path between these two. Does it have to be a circular path, though? It shouldn't. And like this point doesn't need to follow this axis. This doesn't need to stay the same. This can change. So let's say this is our linkage. We go from here to here. And this can be short, it can be long. I need to connect it to the wheel somehow, but it doesn't have to connect along this path per se. Or does it? I've only been playing but could they move linearly? Well, that's essentially what I'm trying to figure out, right? Like, it doesn't matter what path it takes to get from this to this. We just have to actuate this within 11 degrees of rotation of the main cam. So it literally doesn't matter. This could take the craziest path and it'll be fine. But the point that this is at is the closest this can ever be to the center of the cam. This physically can't get closer to the cam. It's making me feel like something like this. So now as this rotates down, this can pull it. I guess it's kind of pushing it. Use what? Use what to our advantage instead of considering it a problem? What do you mean? What did I say? I don't remember what I said. The fact that it can't get any closer to the center of the cam. Yeah, so like that's why I was kind of thinking, you know, in super basic terms, like when I'm usually designing like a 4-bar linkage thing, you can kind of go, okay, what's the circular path? Because all of this is kind of related to a circular path, because each of these cams represents the circle, represents the radius of a circular path, right? So the only circular path between this and this that doesn't, where this is the closest to the center, is literally a tiny circle between these two. So a circle that's like that big. And so that would allow us to do like a geared thing. But I'm feeling like there's a way I should be able to build a linkage that the path goes like this and bounces, right? So it comes down, and then as soon as it hits this point, it moves back in this direction. So that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out right now. The holy grail of all of this is if I can actually figure this out, it's just going to mean the ability to solve 4-bar linkages would be really nice to have. But I feel like I'm just missing one ingredient. It's like I'm trying to solve a mathematical equation and I'm missing one variable that I actually need. And so I'm kind of hunting for it by drawing these lines, like drawing lines between these two guys, knowing that they need to be equal. I feel like that this is a variable. These two lines have to be equal. And so like I said, like this is the smallest little circle you could build, where these two radius basically make the diameter. But if you pull this out, you can get a bunch of different things. I'm wondering, like, this actually is kind of a dumb way to think about it, though, because I need to consider the fact that we need to travel 11 degrees. So this doesn't work, actually. It's the 11 degree travel of this that dictates hang on. If this goes there, this goes there. This is this closest point. This goes here. This goes here, but we make these equal. But that still is going to push that in. Is it raining right now? Oh, it's raining right now. It never rains here. No, that's a lie. It rains here. I think the reason why I think this is so doable is because I must have built a mechanism that does something like this before. Like, this motion to me doesn't seem that weird. This motion to me seems totally doable. I just can't figure it out. I just can't figure it out. Can I do my spline again? Let's just do something like that. Who knows? I don't know why it's not letting me move these splines. It's so frustrating. Like, what's the point of the spline if I can't ever move a spline? Like, oh my god, it's getting stormy out. Oh, and I gotta build my chicken coop. Hold on. I can draw the spline in midair, not attached to anything, and I still can't move the handles. You're actively inside the move tool. No. The move to sketch plane issue if you have a 3D sketch enabled. No. Check the selection filter. Sometimes the selection filters get narrowed down by accident, preventing you from grabbing fine sketch elements like handle dots. Look at your top toolbar, go to select. Go to select. And hover over selection filters. Tried all of this and nothing works. I think it might just be a Fusion lag or a Fusion glitch. So many glitches with Fusion. I still feel like this needs to work somehow. I wonder if I can ask Gemini. What's the question I have, though? Let's say I have a rotating body. I want to actuate a separate body using the rotation of the main body via a 4-bar linkage. I have two specific points where the separate body needs to end up, and these 2 points need to happen within 11.2 degrees of rotation of the main rotating body. The issue is that one of the points closer to the center of the main rotating body represents the closest point at which the separate body can get to the center of the main body. I additionally, after that initial 11.2 degree rotation, I need the separate body to either remain that smallest distance from the center or move completely out of the way. How can I properly figure this out? Let's see what it says. I don't know if I asked that question very good. This is a classic dwell and timing problem wrapped in a linkage design challenge. You are trying to squeeze a specific stroke into a tight window and then hold a position or clear out while the driver keeps spinning. A standard 4-bar linkage crank rocker moves on a continuous curve. It naturally has only 2 instantaneous dead points, extreme positions, where the output reverses direction. It cannot inherently pause or snap out of the way for the remaining rotation. To solve this, you will need to combine 3-position synthesis with a mechanism that alters the transmission path. The main rotating body does not move 360 degrees. It only travels about, 90 degrees in total. The point at which the separate body hits the closest to the center of the main body happens after the first initial 11.2 degrees. A 6-bar linkage or complex cam track. Because the main driver only covers 90 degrees total and your target event happens right at the beginning, first 11.2 degrees, you're looking at a 90 degree total stroke where the separate body plunges inwards rapidly for the first 11.2 degrees, hits a maximum peak closest to the point of the center, and then reverses direction to move completely out of the way for the remaining 78.8 degrees of the rotation. The kinematics, this is achieved by designing the linkage to hit a toggle point, a limit position, or dead center exactly at the 11.2 degree mark. Toggle principle, hitting peak inward travel. In a standard 4-bar linkage, the output link reaches its absolute furthest extreme when the driving crank and the connecting coupler align into a perfectly straight line. This is called the toggle position. Okay. By forcing the straight line alignment to happen exactly when your main body has rotated 11.2 degrees, the separate body will reach its absolute closest point to the center as the main body. By drawing both positions at the same time, the software will calculate the exact link lengths for you. Okay, I don't know about any of this. I don't know about any of this. What can we do here? Okay, hold on. Hold on, I might have this. I might have this. Oh my god, I'm so close. If this is moving forward, boom, it launches that up. Where's this circle coming from? Oh, that's just my spline that I drew that I can't change. I wonder if I could, like... I'm gonna try drawing this simply. Let's see if I could throw it into some AI software here. So... like that, and then like that. 11.2. And then Okay, let's see. To help understand, here is a simple diagram. The large dotted circle represents the main rotating body, where the dotted line is the closest point to the axis that the separate body can get. The separate body is represented by the 10mm circles. By the three 10mm circles. As you can see, the first circle sits well above the main body. After a rotation of 11.2 degrees, the separate body touches the main body, represented by the second 10mm circle. And then the third body, a full 90 degrees away from the first body, can sit either up against the main body, or it can be pushed away. This part doesn't matter. Seeing your Fusion 3D sketch makes the intent crystal clear. You're trying to achieve an inward plunge where the 10mm follower pin drops down to ride perfectly tangent to that inner boundary circle at exactly 11.2 degrees and then retracts or stays clear for the rest of the 90-degree swing. The issue with trying to do this purely with a standard link pinned directly to the rotating wheel is that a single fixed length link cannot easily plunge down sharply and then instantly stop or reverse without a physical pivot point somewhere outside the wheel to guide it. To make this exact geometry work, you need to turn the separate body into a rocker arm, a lever pinned to a fixed spot on your chassis, and drive it using a coupler link connected to the wheel. Can you give me a diagram of this, please? Yeah, like visualizing it like this, it's a little bit more palatable, but I'm not sure. Start. So just for some context, this is what Gemini is showing me here. Hang on. This is what Gemini is showing me here. I had to hide my other chats because I don't know what I talked to it about. But so main rotating center, position 1. It's saying position 2, 90 degrees, but that is not 90 degrees. But am I missing something? What is it trying to tell me? I don't think it's drawing this properly. Senior fusion. Okay, so the issue with trying to do this purely, here's exactly how to structure the sketch to solve for those link lengths. To control this motion, you need a 4-bar chain consisting of the ground, the fixed distance between your main center axis, and the pivot point of your new lever. The crank, the distance from your main center axis to the driving pin on your rotating body. The coupler, a link connecting the driving pin. And then the rocker lever, a fixed arm length holding the 10mm follower that swings from a fixed pivot point outside the wheel. Instead of drawing the links loosely, you can use Fusion 360's constraints to let the geometry calculate for yourself. Look at the 3 positions of state 1, state 2, and state 3. The fixed output lever pivot. Pick a spot outside your rotating wheel where it makes structural sense to mount a pivot pin. Draw a point there and fix it. Draw the follower pins in both states. Draw your first 10mm circle exactly where you want it to start. Draw a line from pivot X to the center of this circle. This line represents your rocker arm. Draw a line from pivot X to the center of this circle. What circle? This line represents your rocker arm. Awesome, man. Well, thanks again for being here. I'm gonna keep working on this a little bit, but yeah, we might have yet another day of trying to figure this out. If I can't figure it out tomorrow, I think we'll just do the easy thing and move on. But I really hope we can figure this out, because that would be so cool. Have a good night, and I'll let you know how far I get tomorrow on this. Apply constraint, draw. Oh, wait. So this is probably the farthest point. No, this is the closest point. That has to be totally horizontal, right? So theoretically, we have a circle to here. We can draw a straight line that's tangential. Oh my god, annoying, annoying. We can draw a straight line that is perfectly tangential to this circle. Because we know as a fact oh god, how does this work? Come on. Come on. I gotta go build my chicken stuff in a minute here, but so we need to come in drastically. What if we just went with a straight vertical situation? Oh, I really like that pulling in though. I really like it if that pulls in. Is that correct too? So let's just assume we're there. And then when this comes up, so we need this to go down. So confused. Literally spending hours just thinking about this. Like what is this? What is happening here? Okay. So if this is a stationary point, This is taking forever. I really want to just see if it does anything that will inspire me at all. Anything that will inspire me at all would be nice. Anything that would inspire me at all would be nice. God, I'm so far behind. I'm so far behind now. Something that can... Maybe I'm thinking about this different. Maybe instead of like connecting it to this. All right, I think I'm going to call it. I'm going to work on this a little bit more, but being on the stream, I feel like is freaking me out a little bit for some reason. So I'm going to call it here. And hopefully tomorrow when I come back to this, I'll have figured this out, but we'll see. I'm not feeling too confident about it because I'm probably going to give up in the next few minutes here, but let's give it a try. Let's see. I want to figure this out before the next stream, or at least move on. So that's kind of where we're at. Anyways, good stuff.